In this video, I'm going to show you how to make all the variations of make ones. At least all the variations I know of. There are 6 of them. So 3 will be knitwise, which is what I'll start with, and 3 will be purlwise. So I've made this swatch and I am going to knit a few stitches before I show you any make ones. If the pattern does not specify make one left or make one right, then you're just going to do a plain make one. And plain make ones leave a little hole like this right here. It's exactly like a small yarn over, actually. And to work a make one that does not lean left or right, we are going to pick up this strand that's between the needles. So you can see the stitch here on my right needle and stitches here on my left needle, and there's this strand in between them. We're just going to stick the working needle underneath that strand, pick up the yarn, and we knit in that strand, just like that. So that's a make one that does not lean left or right. That's just a plain make one. Now to do a make one left, we are going to take the working needle and insert it into that strand from the front to the back. And I always remember left and front both have F's in them. So we go from the front to the back when we're doing a left leaning make one. And then because we inserted the needle in the front, we are going to do the opposite when we knit. We are going to knit into the back of the stitch. So we come back here, just like that, insert the needle behind in the back of the stitch, draw a loop through, and knit it. And you can see that makes a cross that leans toward the left. You see how it's going from down here in the bottom right up toward the left. That is a make one left. All right, I'm going to knit a couple more stitches and then I'll demonstrate a make one right. To do make one right, very similar to the make one left, except it's opposite. So we're going to insert the needle into the rear of the stitch, and I remember that because right and rear both start with R. So if I want to do a make one right, I insert my working needle from the rear, and then again I do the opposite when I knit. I knit into the front because I inserted the needle into the rear. So, and I do use my thumb here to kind of push that stitch around, whether I'm knitting in the front or the back, just to make some slack for my needle to fit in. It just makes it a little bit easier to knit. And now you can see there is my make one, and the yarn is leaning from the bottom left to the top right, so it's leaning toward the right. That's why it's called a make one right. And we're going to continue knitting on so that I can show you how to do these stitches purlwise. I'm going to do them on the purl side because that is when the purlwise make ones are most often used. They don't show up very often in patterns, but occasionally they do, and they tend to trip people up because they're kind of rare. So you just don't see them very often. But they're not hard, especially if you already know how to do the make ones knitwise. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to purl a couple. Now, a plain make one purl, you are going to, of course, bring your yarn to the front because you're purling. You're going to insert your working needle from the back to the front, and you're going to purl just like you were knitting and bring it through that bar. That is a make one purl. That does not lean left or right. It makes a hole, again, like a yarn over, but it is smaller than a yarn over hole. Okay, now, make one left, again, I remember left and front both have F's in them, so I'm going to insert my working needle into that bar between the stitches from the front to the back. I have my working yarn in the front, and because I insert my needle in the front, I do the opposite when I knit. I'm going to knit, or in this case purl, into the back. Now purling into the back means I have to bring my working needle around, and again I'm going to use my finger here to push this stitch on my left needle. I don't know if you can see that. I pushed it around to give me some slack back there so I can get my needle in, because you have to take your working needle, dip it below the stitch, and kind of go in from the bottom toward the top, toward the front, and then you can purl it. Lost the tension on my yarn. Let's see, then I can purl it. And you can see again that crosses from the left to the right, making a purl one left. And I will show that one more time because it is pretty tricky. So the left, we're going to insert the working needle into that bar between the stitches from the front to the back. Bring the working yarn forward, and I'm going to insert my working needle into the back of the stitch from the bottom toward the top and toward the front, and then purl that stitch. Just kind of dip it below that back leg there and slide it off. And it's tight because I just did a couple close together, because the make ones pull up the yarn from the other stitches, so they do tend to tighten your other stitches that are around it just slightly, which is never really an issue in a normal pattern because you're not usually doing a bunch of row like I'm doing right now. So, whoops, let's get away from one of the yarn overs or make ones I did previously. Okay, now make one right purlwise. Again, right and rear start with R, so I'm going to insert the working needle into the rear of the stitch, and I'm going to do the opposite when I knit. So I'm going to bring the yarn forward to purl, and I'm going to purl in the front. I inserted the needle into the rear, I'm going to work in the front, always the opposite of where you inserted your needle. And I'm going to purl that stitch, and there is my make one purl leaning to the right.